All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janaya Downing. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admissions at Purdue University. And today I get the really cool privilege of talking with you, our counselors, about the conversation around diversity and equity at Purdue University, and more importantly, how that relates to you and your students. I have a little bit of data. I have some slides that talk about what our campus life is all about and the resources that your students, specifically those with like a diverse background, what they can expect when they come to a school like Purdue University. I may not have all the answers, but at the end of the presentation, we will have a time for a Q&A. So if you will, we'll go ahead and get started. I got my coffee ready, so let's jump right into this. So the plan for the day is we're going to talk about the purpose of this conversation. We're going to talk about the numbers, our cultural centers, some college resources, student life, and I built in a little bit of admissions information towards the end, just in case we have that space for like a recap of the admission process, just in case this is your first time saying that as well. So first off, this whole conversation around diversity. Well, let's talk about the numbers. I know it's really easy for us to just start a conversation, but not really dig into the numbers, the facts and the figures. For today, we're going to talk about our student population and our faculty population and what that looks like. Now, keep in mind, Purdue, like most universities in the country, is a predominantly white institution. We don't hide from that or shy away from that. That's just the reality of our university. And we're taking strides to become a more diverse campus. But for right now, our numbers, they kind of look like this. Now, I've omitted our white population because that is the larger population on our campus, and that would skew the way this chart would look. So I just put data in about our different minority populations on campus. As you can see, many of our populations have been increasing, and this is pretty much on par with what we're seeing nationally. Our Latinx population is growing exponentially. Our Asian population and our multiracial population. Our Black and African American population is staying right around the same amount each year. I will tell you, for that population in general, we are making a lot of strides to increase the number of our Black and African American students on our campus, as well as all of our minority groups. We want our campus to be a place where students can come and interact with different types of people. And I think you're going to see a trend of that throughout this presentation when I get to the resources that are available for you. Similar to that, our population for faculty and staff is similar to our student population, where the vast majority are in the white population. However, we have been seeing some increases in our multiracial African American and Latinx populations over the last 3 years. And we hope to continue to see that as we find new ways of recruiting and retaining diverse staff members. These are not numbers that we think of as some type of like mountaintop. We definitely know we still need to climb to represent the more diverse world that our students are going to be exposed to. And a part of helping them with that is them being around diverse students and faculty throughout their time at Purdue. Let's talk about our cultural centers. This is one of my favorite parts of going to Purdue, not only because I know they're there and I can tell you about them, but also because as a person in the community, I get to experience them also. Much of what they do, even now during a pandemic, is to enrich the lives of every student at Purdue's campus, not just the students who identify with that racial group, not just for students who don't know anything about that racial group, it's for everyone. So if you find home and community there, great, you should go. If it's a challenge for you because you grew up in an area where no one that you grew up with in your high school, in your neighborhood, in your circle really shared that racial identity, you should go to them as well. And that's something we encourage our students, and we encourage you to tell your students about when they're considering a school like Purdue. We have 5 cultural centers. Now, I'll take some time to talk about each one of them individually, but starting at the top, we have ARC, our Asian American and Asian Resource and Cultural Center, the LGBTQ Center, the Latino Cultural Center, Black Cultural Center, and the Native American Educational Cultural Center. 5 amazing spaces on our campus. We'll start with the Black Cultural Center. This one has been around the longest. It actually just celebrated 50 years of existence on Purdue's campus. It was established in 1969. It is a beautiful facility. The actual facility itself has won awards for its architectural design, the use of space. It was designed by a Black architectural firm out of Indianapolis. They do their cultural art series. They have multiple ensembles there, dance, singing, spoken word, the Black Thought Collective, like really great groups that are going to help your students learn about the history and the experiences of Black culture in America and abroad. They do their own study abroad opportunities to really help you learn about Black history through a lens that many students don't get in high school. Candidly, I remember my high school experience, and outside of the month of February, we really didn't talk about much when it related to Black history. We talked about essentially the founding of America, and then we jumped to the Civil War, and nothing in between was really discussed with respect to the Black experience in America. And then we jumped to World War I and World War II. So much of the Black experience is lost in K through 12, and places like the Black Cultural Center really open a student's mind up to what the Black experience has been in America. Our next center, the second oldest, is our Latino Cultural Center. Beautiful space. This is a picture that hangs in the Latino Cultural Center depicting the different types of salsa throughout Central and South America. Really love this image, and every time I go in, I always stop to take a look at it to try to find something new. But they were established in 2003, so a little bit later, but it is a vibrant center. The book and media collection, I always bring in new material for students to read, movies for them to watch. They kind of set the stage for our National Latinx Heritage Month celebrations, whether it be Dia de los Muertos, whether it be different food events. I will say, candidly, they do probably the best like food events. And I would say that to all of my friends who work at the cultural centers. The Latino Cultural Center is kind of killing it when it comes to the different type of like family meals and the different type of cultural expression with meals from, Central and South America, bringing in people to prepare meals and just talking about it. They do a lot over dinner. So I really enjoy that experience whenever I can go there. They also host their own graduation ceremony for our students who may be interested in participating in that, as well as the larger larger graduation ceremony throughout Purdue University. The next one is our Native American Educational and Cultural Center. This is another space that I think is transformative for our students because, again, when you're going through K through 12, many students, they really don't get brought into the Native American experience that much. I have a kind of a quiz that I do when groups were able to visit campus, where I would ask the crowd, how many of you throughout high school have spent more than 30 days learning specifically about Native American history? And I've been working at Purdue for about 8 years now. And in that entire time, I've had less than 10 people raise their hand to say, yes, my school dedicated time to learning about this culture. And it's heartbreaking to know that with them being such a rich part of our history in this country, we don't learn about them K through 12. So many times students actually learn the most about their history from going to the center. It's a smaller place on campus, but they support so many different student groups that call Purdue University home. They've been around since 2007. They do a lot of their history through storytelling. And because we don't have a tremendous like Native American presence in Indiana, they actually bring people who used to live in Indiana, whose family, at some point in their history were moved west. They bring people back to tell the stories about their family heritage, their lineage, what traditions they still hold today, where they're located. They do craft circles and film series. They've been able to help develop a Native American and Indigenous Studies minor. They just do a lot of really cool things to help students of all races learn more about the Native American experience in America. Next, we have our LGBTQ Center, or the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Center. Amazing space. Much of what they do is still in the educational phase, like helping people understand more about this community. Not that they need to somehow create a narrative or about the LGBTQ population, but so many people come to Purdue and many universities with just little knowledge of that population. More people are learning about it throughout time as you have more people who are in like the spotlight of this country and moving to more prominent positions are now being seen on the news and throughout pop culture and through movies. But I think this center does one of the best jobs just educating people about the LGBTQ experience in this country. One of the best things they do is something called safe zone training. I've experienced safe zone training, many of my colleagues have, and what they do is they bring you in and they just educate you. They help you learn about different identities. They help you learn about how to be an ally to support this population, how to be helpful, how to find more information. They also do a lot with community. With the LGBTQ community, they do a lot with respect to their like Fab Fridays, where they'll have students come to the LGBTQ center, they'll do crafts, they'll have food, they'll watch movies, they'll read books, they'll have guest speakers come. So just a really amazing space where they're here to educate, they're here to help people that just learn about this really important population. They've been around since 2012. And the last center is the baby, the newest one, but so overdue for them to be here, and that is ARC, the Asian American and Asian Resource and Cultural Center. ARC is the product of a grassroots effort by students from the Asian and Asian American population at Purdue that wanted a place to call their own as well. They were established in 2015. It was literally students and petitions and fundraising that led to basically an office that led to a bigger office that now is its own standalone building. And they serve a population of well over 6,000 domestic students, and a large majority of our international population are served very well by this center. They bring in speakers from everywhere, because one of the biggest challenges with opening this center originally was when you think about the Asian experience, they didn't want it to just be for Asian American people or international students, because the experience of someone who is Asian American who was born and grew up in Chicago is very different from someone who was born and grew up in Taipei. So they wanted to try to figure out, like, how do we bring these cultures together while still giving everyone room to learn about different cultural groups and different understandings? When you think about the music and the food and the history and the dance and all these like rich speakers and writers and these different cultures, how do you honor all of them? It's a tall task, and every year they try their best to bring in these different groups of people to make this an incredible place for students to go and learn and feel community. One of their biggest events is Lunar New Year every year. So when you come to our campus, you can expect to be a part of that if you choose to. All of this is under the purview of our Division of Diversity and Inclusion. The photograph of the gentleman on the slide is Dr. John Gates. He is the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion, and he oversees all of those centers as well as a few others that are listed here too on the page as well. And their entire initiative is to not just have spaces for people to go, it's to have spaces that are transformative for our students. If you ask the Vice Provost what he thinks diversity is, it is excellence. And I really appreciate that model because, or that saying, because diversity is excellence. Being different or having a different lived experience is not something that students should be embarrassed about or shy away from. They should be excited to express the excellence of their culture. They should be put in spaces where they can talk about their upbringing, the food they ate, their lived experiences, their heroes, people who look like them, who they share this type of really amazing experience of living in America with or living abroad. And we want students to not just exist on our campus, we want them to thrive. And this is the division that helps do things like bring guest speakers, secure funding for scholarships, communicate with alumni, lead equity task force to help take care of issues that are going on our campus. I will say this, and to anyone, we're not perfect. We don't claim to be perfect. And I think it would be a lie if we said we were perfect. But we are making strides in the right direction for our students. And I think many schools are grappling with what it looks like to support students right now. And I will tell you from my personal experience, Purdue is working very hard to help support its students. Again, we're not perfect, but we are working at it. As we continue, I want to tell you a little bit about the college resources that exist for your students if they choose to come to a school like Purdue. These are all of our colleges. And one of my favorite parts about Purdue University is while we have this great like top level piece with the VP Gates and the cultural centers, it also, this idea of diversity and more importantly, support bleeds into every one of our colleges. And that is so important because just like the experience of a student who grew up in Chicago who identifies in the LGBTQ plus community is different from someone from, Indianapolis who identifies in the same community, the diverse experience of someone in the College of Liberal Arts might be very different from someone in the College of Agriculture versus the College of Pharmacy and the College of Science. So in every college, you will find a individual or individuals or an office or a unit dedicated to helping students with diverse backgrounds be supported. A place for you to go. They're going to reach out to your students on day one. They're going to invite them whenever we can start meeting together again, to dinners, to meet guest speakers, to learn about scholarships, to just meet other students in the college that are from diverse backgrounds. They're going to be there to do all those things that help support your students. So that's really cool because again, when you're the minority in a college, it could be difficult sometimes to just find other people with your shared experience. So this is an avenue by which that is created. When you show up and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many other people who look like me. And oh, you graduated from here and you're going into the workforce that I want to go into one day. And I can imagine myself doing what you're doing. So I want to talk to you. They try to create those experiences for our students. And it's definitely appreciated by many of the students at Purdue. Let's talk about the student life. I'll briefly touch on some of the things that we have here for your students when they arrive. Number one, clubs and organizations. We know this is a big part of going to college. There's nothing more frustrating than a student who just goes straight to class and then goes back to their room and goes back to class and back to their room and complains about being bored on campus. Really, there's thousands of clubs on our campus, and over 250 of those clubs have a diversity, multicultural, advocacy, or religious emphasis. So a large number of our clubs are dedicated to this idea of diversity, equity, and social justice. And we love that. We also have the National Pan-Hellenic Council on our campus, or more often called the Divine Nine, the historically Black fraternities and sororities. We also have the Multicultural Greek Council, which has a number of different fraternities and sororities that directly bring together students from different backgrounds, different communities. Some of them are community-based, some of them are service-based, some of them are major-based. So these different pockets of communities that your students can take advantage of once they come to Purdue. I know that faith is something that many students grapple with when they come to college, and we are definitely not saying that that has to be a part of your experience. We do hear that question sometimes. So just quickly, on campus, there are a number of different groups that honor students who are following Jewish faith, Catholicism, Christianity. There's a number of different groups that are listed on campus, but then once you pan out to the university or to the cities at large, you have many more. So I would say that your student is going to be supported from their faith standpoint once they come to Purdue as well. If you have any questions about this, I'll be happy to connect you with one of these groups if you send us an email to the office. Most of them can be found at the visitor center or the visitor center website for Lafayette and West Lafayette. That's where I found many of these different organizations. I want to briefly talk about the admissions piece because I know that this is something that you're talking with your students about. So I won't go into this too much, but there are some really important things I think that you would want to share with your students, just in case you haven't had a chance to talk with them about this yet. These are the 5 things we ask every student to turn in when they apply. The Common Application, we are exclusively a Common App school this year. The Purdue questions, why Purdue University and why this major at Purdue University. I also want to give a little bit of space for another area where a student can write something. Outside of those Purdue questions, there is the formal essay that the Common App has, but there's also a anything else kind of essay that can be written. I know that for many students, that anything else essay area can just be kind of like, well, I'm done writing. I've written 3 essays. I'm kind of finished with this. But the reality is, at Purdue, we read every single student's application, we read your essays, we see everything. And many times, I can speak for my colleagues as well, we've come across information in that other area that was so helpful for us making our decision, especially if the student may have struggled their freshman year of school, but During that time, they moved a couple of times. There were some issues going on with health or with family. And without us knowing that additional piece, we just assumed that student just kind of took that year off, or they just weren't really serious about their education. So you know your students way better than we do. If you ever have a student who has something to say, but they are like, oh, should I tell the school this? I'm nervous that it might hurt my chance of being admitted. We're people. We understand students are having one of the toughest experiences with not just this year, but like if you look back, many of these students were born just after 9/11, and they went through a housing crisis when they were in junior high, and now they're rolling into their senior and junior year during a pandemic. So they've had, a story to tell that could have affected their academics at any point. Please encourage them to do that. We would love to know more about the students we're admitting, not just about the grades and the numbers, but about their personal life and their experiences. There's also self-reported grades and test scores. During this time, I know many schools are making different ways of doing education, whether it be virtual or hybrid or some combination of the two. Self-reported grades will allow your students to essentially put their grades and test scores right there into the application. So you don't have to feel the pressure of mailing another transcript or sending another transcript electronically. They can do it on their own. Now, after they're admitted and they accept their offer, then we'll ask them to send us the official transcripts next summer after graduation. Test scores, we are test flexible this year. If students have test scores, we would love to see them. If they don't have test scores, it will not negatively impact them with respect to scholarship or admission decisions, even for our more competitive programs. The essay, again, I spoke about that a little bit, but it's just a chance to tell us a little bit more about who they are. And then there's a $60 application fee or a waiver. If your students need a waiver, there are tons of them built into the application, but also if they don't meet the criteria for one of the ones that are built in, just have them email us, admissions@purdue.edu. We can get that worked out for them. A few pieces about scholarship. The Boiler Affordability Grant is something for Indiana residents. So if you have students who are Indiana residents, if their family makes roughly $70,000 or less per year, there's a good chance they're going to come to Purdue University tuition free. So have your students fill out the FAFSA after they apply, and hopefully they can have access to that Boiler Affordability Grant based on their family income. Our merit scholarship deadline is November 1. Really important because we definitely want to make sure those students have access to all of our merit-based awards. Some of them will have access to our supplemental scholarships depending on the college they are part of. So they will get an email encouraging them to apply for a supplemental scholarship before December 15th. Of course, there's FAFSA. We want to get that before March 1st. So we can get them a financial aid package in the month of March. And we also have our Emerging Leader Award. This is an award that's been given for the last 7 or 8 years to the predominantly underrepresented minority population. Not exclusively, but a large part of the students who are receiving the award are from more diverse populations. So I want you to encourage your students to apply to Purdue by November 1, do the FAFSA, and hope they receive some type of merit-based award. And we will give them their entire financial aid package by March so they can make the best possible decision. With that said, this is our last super long slide of information. So you can go ahead and read this. This is essentially our non-discrimination policy on our campus. So I'll give you 10 seconds to read it, and I'll wrap up with a few comments about essentially the climate right now and what it looks like for students who come to Purdue. So the way I kind of sum this up when I have, and I'm gonna kind of let you into a question I receive often from students and parents and even counselors nowadays. What's the climate like for gonna be like for my student? What can they expect when they come to Purdue? This is my kind of go-to statement about it because I've seen it happen multiple times. If Purdue University is a place that I appreciate because of all the students here, there's probably about 98% that you can have a conversation with, and you can vehemently disagree with each other. You can oppose every single thing that person is saying to you. However, you can have that conversation, walk away, shake hands, walk away, and be fine. That's the majority, the vast majority of students here. They have disagreements. They don't they didn't have the same upbringing, the same background, but it's an educational opportunity to learn more about each other and to figure out why someone believes what they believe. But just like your hometowns, we have about 2% of crazy on our campus. And I would say every college has about 2% of crazy. These are individuals that you can't talk to, you can't reason with, you can't share your ideas. They are going to try to yell their ideas to you if you want to hear them or not. That's okay. We live in a society where free speech is encouraged. However, there is a line, and that line is when that person's words or actions make you feel like you're not a part of the Purdue community, you are less than a person, you are not welcome here, that's when our non-discrimination policy kicks in. Students, we ask them to report anything they feel is discrimination towards them. We have a anonymous program where they can report this. We have tons of people, faculty, staff, resident assistants, student, faculty advisors. There's so many places they can report any type of discrimination they feel on this campus, and it will be taken very seriously. I've seen many students in the past couple of years who've actually lost their place here at Purdue because of the words that were said. I've seen this also happen to staff members and a couple of faculty. So if your student ever comes to even you after they've come to Purdue University and they say this is something that happened, please reach out to us. We do not want this to be a part of our community. Again, we're not perfect. We're working to be better, but this is one of those lines in the sand where if students cross this, there could definitely be some significant repercussions for those actions. And this also applies to faculty and staff. So if a faculty member makes your student feel unwelcome, if a staff member does the same thing, this is a chance for us to use this policy to help keep our students protected, our faculty and our staff protected as well. Thank you. This is a tough conversation. I love having it because you all are on the front lines. You see much of this well before we ever see it. You get to engage with your students well before we do. You know what makes them excited and also what makes them nervous well before we do. Thank you all so much for your time today. I appreciate you being willing to sit down and listen to us. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you and have a wonderful day.